Hello again, welcome to the second of my Storytime videos. If you haven't seen the first one, I will leave a link down in the description box below. Both of these videos have been inspired by the fact that I'm coming up to being 14 years all clear of cancer. Today's video is all about my near-death or white light experience. If this isn't your kind of thing, please feel free to click away. So I had been diagnosed as having cervical cancer by my local hospital and had been referred on to the Royal Marsden. There are two Royal Marsden hospitals, one is in central London, one is in Sutton, and they are a centre of excellence. They're well known in the UK as being one of the premier cancer hospitals, and they're also known around the world for their pioneering cancer treatment. So I had absolutely no doubt that I was in the very best possible hands. I had been scheduled to have a laparoscopically assisted vaginal hysterectomy and lymphadenectomy. And although it sounds rather complicated, and it is major surgery, this is bread and butter for the Royal Marsden. This is what they do. So I felt absolutely confident that everything would be fine. I was admitted the night before, and luckily my mum was allowed to stay with me that night. On the day of my operation, I went down to theatre at 9 o'clock for my operation at 9:30, and apparently it was going to take about 3 hours, and I would be out and back up on the ward between 12:30 and 1 o'clock. Unfortunately, this was not to be. The last thing I remember before going in for the operation was them putting the anaesthetic into the Venflon on my arm and asking me to count backwards from 10. I think I got as far as 8 and I don't remember any more. The next thing I do remember was kind of being woozy, being aware of being on a bed with the lights passing above my head, and you get that kind of shuttering effect. I'm sure you've seen it on the on ER on the television, and in Casualty when people are being wheeled through the hospital. Up until the point when I get to ITU, I have no recollection of this. This is only what I have been told subsequently. The hysterectomy itself went without a hitch. It was absolutely fine. The problem started when they came to try and remove the lymph nodes. They had real trouble locating them and isolating them in order that they could be removed. And instead of coming out of theatre at 12:30, I didn't get out until about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Now, normally when you have an operation, they will start to increase your pain relief as they decrease the anaesthesia. And at this point, your body is supposed to start taking over all of its systems. Your kidneys will produce urine, your heart will start beating for itself, your lungs will start working for themselves. Everything is just supposed to come back to normal. But with me, for some reason, it didn't. My pulse rate was very, very low. I wasn't opening my lungs wide enough to get sufficient oxygen into my system. So instead of my pulse ox, my oxygen saturation levels being about 98 to 99%, they were hovering around 75 to 80%. My blood pressure, which is naturally very low anyway, was right down in my boots. And they weren't really sure why this was happening. About 3:30, 4 o'clock, a nurse went down to the ward when my mum was waiting and said, she's not coming back down here, we've taken her to ITU. Normally when you come out of an operation, they take you into a little side room known as resus, and they will just check that you're coming out of anaesthetic properly and that everything is starting to work properly. But because for me it wasn't working, I bypassed resus and had been taken straight up to the intensive care unit. Because I wasn't able to breathe properly for myself, I had been given a forced oxygen mask. This is one that blows oxygen into your mouth. So some of it goes into your lungs, but some of it goes into your stomach. And because of that, I also had to have a nasogastric tube to get the oxygen out of my stomach. my mum came up and sat next to the bed and was stroking the back of my hand, and one of the nurses said to my mum, "Oh, look, she knows you're here." And all my stats had started to kind of settle down. My blood pressure started to come up, my pulse started to come up, my pulse ox started to come up, and it appeared that I was recovering slightly. It wasn't great, I wasn't doing great, but I was getting better. And then, for some unknown reason, my pulse ox dropped, my pulse rate dropped, my blood pressure dropped, and all the alarms on all the machines started to go haywire and shrieking, and they came over, and again, where they had managed to get my pulse ox up to about 85, 90, I dropped back down to 75, 80 again, and my pulse had practically disappeared, and my blood pressure had bottomed right out. And they could not understand. This cycle continued for the next however many hours, and I would improve, I would get better, and then I'd suddenly just bottom out again. And then I'd improve, and I'd improve, and I'd improve, and I'd improve, and then I'd bottom out again. And this was a continuous cycle throughout the rest of the evening, which they simply could not understand. And alongside this, in the whole time since I'd been out of theatre, my kidneys had not produced any urine at all. So it was decided that to try and give them a bit of a kick start, they would give me some plasma or some albumin, I don't remember which it was, but basically to try and force my kidneys into working. Well, they didn't. And the only thing that happened as a result of me being given this extra fluid was that I was now hemodilated, which meant that I was anemic, which required them to give me a unit of blood to get my hemoglobin up. So they'd given me more fluid, and my body was not producing any. Well, it has to go somewhere, and where it was going was into my lungs. At some point in the evening, my mum went home. Obviously, she was exhausted. And I was kind of coming out of the anaesthetic, and I was a little bit more aware of what was going on. And I was aware that things weren't right. And basically, I was in a very slow decline. So all my stats would bottom out, and then I would recover over the next period of time, and then my stats would bottom out again. And each time that happened, although I was recovering, I wasn't recovering as quickly, and I wasn't recovering as well. And I was basically just kind of ebbing away. And they were just not sure as to why this was happening. They really didn't know why this was happening. At some point in the early hours of the morning, a nurse came to remove the internal padding and dressings that they had left in the vagina after the operation. Now, I've done Tai Chi and Qigong, and every time I have a blood test, an injection, a piercing, a tattoo, I will breathe through the pain. So I'll take a deep breath in before the needle goes in, and as the needle goes in, I will slowly breathe out, and it helps me to just breathe through the pain. And I remember asking the nurse if she would just tell me when she was going to remove all of the padding and the dressings so that I could breathe through it. Well, I don't know if she didn't hear, didn't listen, ignored me, or if because of the mask and everything else, she simply didn't understand what I was saying. But she didn't tell me, and she didn't give me the opportunity to breathe. She just pulled the lot out, and I hit the ceiling I've never known pain like it before or since. It was just horrendous. And she leant across the bed and pushed something on the other side of the bed at this point. At which point every alarm on every machine went absolutely haywire. And a whole group of people appeared and started, checking this and pushing that and trying to work out what the heck was going on. I believe that there was a call for a crash cart. Now, at this point, I'm in a hospital bed. I'm semi-sitting up because of the forced oxygen mask. And the head of the bed is against the wall. If I did this and reached through the bars, I could actually touch the wall behind me. And it's just standard hospital wall. There's a run of plug sockets, and there's oxygen outlets and all that kind of thing. And surrounding me were all the various monitors and machines and things. I have gone from being semi-sat up, looking upwards towards the ceiling, to being stood behind my bed, arms folded, leaning on the top of the bed head. And I'm watching myself in the bed, and all of this activity, all these people going crazy bonkers round the bed. And I was quite dispassionate about it. I was aware of what was going on, but I was kind of, oh, this is interesting, what's going on here? The majority of people were checking all the various machines, but at the end of the bed there was one nurse who was standing rather, going through my chart, and she's lifting up a bit and she's putting it down. And as I'm watching her, I'm aware of a presence beside me, and this very bright white light behind me, and I've turned, and stood next to me is this very tall, muscular, bronzed male figure who looks like he's been oiled up, wearing a very short white linen kilt type effect. I don't know if it was his head per se or if it was a headdress, but it was the face of a jackal. I had Anubis stood beside me. And again, I'm very nonplussed by all of this, and I'm just looking. So I've turned to Anubis and I've said, oh, so this is me dying then? Yes. Okay. So what happens now? Well, that's up to you. What do you mean it's up to me? He said, you can come with me now and move on, or you can go back. Either way, you'll be fine. So what do you think? I think you have work to do. Oh, so I go back then? Yes, I think you should go back. All right. At this moment, I have gone back from being stood behind my bed watching all this activity to being lying in my bed looking at the ceiling, and I'm aware of a very authoritative female voice saying, it's the morphine, stop the morphine. And it was the night sister that was in charge of the ward at that point in time. what I had seen her do was checking the drug chart against my SATs. I was on a morphine pump. It wasn't continuous, but every so often I would be given a dose. And what she noticed was the point at which I was given a dose, immediately after that, all my SATs would bottom out. That's when my heart rate would drop, my blood pressure would drop, my pulse ox would drop. Was immediately after each dose of morphine. And of course, because morphine has a cumulative effect to a degree, each time I was dosed, the recovery was taking longer and I wasn't recovering as well. At the point at which I had had the dressings removed and I screamed, the nurse, when she reached across me, had pushed the override button to give me an additional dose of morphine, which was that one dose too many. That's the one that would have killed me. And whilst everyone was running around trying to work out what the heck was happening, this night sister, to whom I am eternally indebted, had had the sense to actually check my charts and see if there was a pattern and see if there was a correlation, and there was. It was the morphine. My kidneys weren't working, my heart wasn't working, my lungs weren't working because of the morphine. It was shutting me down. Basically, I was going into multiple organ failure as a result of an allergy to morphine. What tickles me slightly is that had I died, my actual cause of death would have been drowning because my lungs were just filling up with water. I'd have drowned in a hospital bed in Chelsea, of all things. So I now wear an SOS bracelet. Which states that I'm allergic to morphine and all derivatives. And I've got one that got a dog tag that hangs in my car and that, so that if I'm ever in any kind of situation, I'm not given morphine because it will kill me. Now, there are those of you who may believe that I didn't actually have a discussion with Anubis at all. It wasn't a white light experience at all. It was a hallucination brought on by a morphine overdose. And you are entitled to your opinion. And yes, you may well be right, but that doesn't explain my change in perspective from being kind of semi-sitting up at a low level to be standing up, looking slightly down on everything that's happening. I believe truly that my God came to me at that time and gave me the choice to go on or come back. I believe truly that my God told me to come back because I have work to do. But even if it was just a morphine-induced hallucination, it has had a profound effect on me. Because now I wake up and every day is a blessing. Every one of the 5,110 days that I've had since that operation is a day that maybe I should not have had. And yes, there are those days, I will admit it, there are those days when the lymphedema is just too much and I am really down, that I kind of think I made the wrong choice. But they are few and far between, and for the most part I am very blessed. I have a great life. Almost dying really has reinforced that life's too short kind of attitude. There are things that I don't worry about. There are things I don't stress about because, let's be honest, I could be dead tomorrow. You know, as much as I have recovered from cancer and got over the whole morphine thing, I could step outside the house and be hit by a car. So it has made me much more focused on the present, live in the now, which is not to say that I'm completely without any kind of plans. I do plan and I do care, but I try not to let things worry me, because in the greater scheme of things, actually they're not really that important. Having come so close to death as well, now I'm not scared of it. I don't particularly want to suffer, and I don't want it to be a long drawn out process. You know, if I'm going to die, let me just have a heart attack in my sleep and go. But I'm not actually afraid of dying. It holds no fear for me. It holds no mystery for me. I know where I'm going, and I know exactly who's going to be there and what's going to happen when I get there. So, in many ways, it has been a great blessing to me. Every day in my job, I see people who are struggling with their lives for one reason or another. And there are days when I struggle with mine for one reason or another. But if this has taught me anything, it really is that life is too short. Thank you for listening to my latest story. If you do believe that this was just a morphine-induced hallucination, I respect your opinion, and I respectfully request to agree to differ. If you do leave any comments, I might be a bit slow on replying, because I'm off on my Ollibobs tomorrow. I'm thoroughly excited. I am planning on doing some videoing whilst I'm out there, but I won't be near a laptop to be able to do any kind of editing, or and I don't really want to be spending my holiday kind of checking on comments on YouTube. So it's going to be a little while before I am able to answer, but I will, of course, endeavour to answer as soon as I get back. Whatever you do, live your life to the fullest. Enjoy. Take care of yourselves until I see you again. Bye.